All right, welcome to the Rich Dad Stockcast with Andy Tanner. And today we're going to explain how the Federal Reserve affects your stock investing. And Andy's probably the only one I know that can explain that. So let's go ahead and bring Andy in and get straight to it, because this is not a small topic. This is a pretty big deal. And I think that Andy would tell you it's one of the more important things you have to learn as an investor. Is that right,
100%.
Okay.
100%. It was interesting how this show came to be, because we were talking about things that just are essential. Like, if you're going to be an investor and you're going to make money in, stocks, or for that matter, business, real estate, anything, a knowledge of how policy works with money would make sense. It'd be essential. But often when I bring that up, when I'll get on a podcast as a guest or be interviewed on a radio show, the host will worry. He'll say, well, I don't know that sounds that sexy. And I'm like, okay, but I'll tell you what, it's way sexy, because if you want to have a shot at peering into the future, and if you want to have an idea of how things work, this is essential stuff. So hopefully people will understand that once you dive into it, your worldview is like, oh my gosh, okay, I see. All right. It will change your worldview.
I can tell you it did change the way that I look at investing, and my wife and I's strategy, because Robert is talking about this
every day,
single day. Yeah.
Constantly. Yep.
So you can't ignore it. It's probably the most important thing to Robert, and how he conducts his investing and money, and how he looks at everything.
Well,
so yeah, not a little topic.
Think about it in that context. Why is it so important? Well, money creation, what is monetary policy? It's the laws, it's the rules of the game. So if you want to get good at the game, what is a policy? If you have corporate policy, these are the rules. If you have fiscal policy, here's the decisions, here's the rules. Monetary policy, here's the rules. So if you want to be good at a game, you would want to learn the rules of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should mention a couple things. The way this show came to be about was Andy mentioned it in one of the earlier shows, probably, 5-6 weeks ago. And we had so many comments saying, hey, we want a free course on this. We want you to teach us. And so Andy actually went and created a course. I think you're in the process of modifying a little bit just for our audience. But two things. One, you can get the link to the course in the description. And this topic is, as Andy would say, pretty meaty. So we're gonna touch on it on this show, but then to get deeper, you're gonna want to click on this link and get Andy's free class. While we're at this, though, like I said, this came to be because people wrote in the comments, and that's crazy.
And I would say,
go ahead.
Just in terms of description, this type of a web class, this isn't a small one. It's probably, it's meaty. It's like a course. It's not something where you're going to spend 90 minutes or 2 hours, or there's 10 different modules in this course I'm going to give you guys. And what I'm giving you is all of the major levers that the Fed can pull. And it's stuff that most people really don't know about. For example, if I ask the audience right now, if you judge yourself from ignorance to awareness to competency to proficiency, and I say reverse repo market, how much could you say about that? How much could you talk about it? And how much do you know about how it affects? If I talk about things like money markets, and I say, how does the reverse repo rate impact the money market? What does it mean? If you're saying, I have no clue on that, well, I can give you a clue on that. And so we have 10. These are done not just with me, they're with my team. And it really is a labor of love, because this is something everyone, and I never charge for this, because it's important as an electorate to understand it. It's important as an investor to understand it. And I give away it's a major course. It's not tiny. It's big.
Yeah, every week you're generous. You give us a course. I'm going to say roughly there 45 minutes to an hour and 15 right in there. But this course you're giving, clearly a labor of love, because I think you're at 10 hours almost on this course.
More than that. And people could take two attitudes towards that. And this will tell you immediately, like where you are. You can say, really? 10, 15 hours on the Fed? Really? you can say, really, you'll spend that time with me, really? So it's really about your attitude. And if you love education, there's one thing I can tell you, and I don't want to get on my high horse on being an education advocate, because people can do what they want. But there's an important thing to realize about process as a student of education. Some people tune in for advice because they want something for nothing. They say, well, just tell me what to buy. And that's not how it works, because markets change every day. You can say, buy gold today, and it could change tomorrow, right? Advice is lazy. Those people don't want to engage in a process of personal development. They don't want to engage in, the work. If you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, there's 6 lessons. The first one is the rich don't work for money. But the last one is the rich work to learn. We do work to learn. We seek knowledge. And so if you enjoy the process and you enjoy learning and having aha moments and oh my gosh moments and insights and oh, now I see how this works moments, if you like that stuff, you're going to love this course. So with that, I hope you enjoy it.
Well, with that, I do have to say 2 things. One, you can get in the descriptions. We said that. But 2, you're going to learn some pretty great things, but you have to understand that this is financial education, not financial advice. So when Andy starts talking about, say, things he does or how the Fed will affect certain things, he's educating you, but he's not telling you to take action because he doesn't know you. He doesn't know your situation. And so that's an important thing to differentiate us between other people who deliver education. I guess I'm trying to say that Andy is going to teach, like you just said, instead of advise, and you need to understand that mindset that Andy's here to help you, but not here to boss you around. Is that fair, Andy?
Yeah. Oh, and not only not boss around, but look, it's no skin off my nose. I've learned that, it's interesting. One time with Robert, we were in a big event, and he said something like, your house is not an asset. And there was some dude who, in his own mind was pretty smart. He had good academic credentials. I think he was a medical doctor, so obviously smarter than me. And he says, my house is too an asset. I disagree with you. I thought, man, Robert's going to kill this guy. Right. I mean, and it was interesting because I saw Robert just go to the other side of the stage and he's just ignoring the guy. And I thought, that makes sense. Why should someone who knows how to do this get down on his hands and knees and try to convince someone who doesn't know how to do it to do it? And so I don't not only boss people around, I shrug my shoulders, say, you do what you want to do. So I think that's good advice. If you have family members and friends who dissuade what you want to do, I wouldn't engage with them. I wouldn't tell them what to do. Just do your own life, right?
Yeah,
we all have our freedom. Yeah,
absolutely. So Andy, we're going to discuss, you're going to explain, I should say, the Federal Reserve and really how it affects your stock market and your strategy to investing. Do you want to just kind of give us a little?
Let's start with this.
Yeah.
The Holy Grail for people in investing, and this is not just for stocks, this is anything, is we're constantly trying to do something that's really hard to do called predicting the future. So around this time of year, I get all kinds of invitations and calls where people say, give us your predictions for 2024, as if I have a crystal ball, in my back pocket, and I can, I have super mental powers that normal people wouldn't have. And so we're constantly trying to predict it. And what's interesting is perhaps the defining characteristic of the market is that it's unpredictable. However, the one thing that can give you a barometer on how things are going to go, probably more than anything else, is policy. Now, let me explain this, Greg. You can tell a lot about what's going to happen by the policies that are made. For example, let's say we make a rule that says when people turn 71 years old or 70 and a half or whatever the number is now, they have to begin taking withdrawals and distributions for the 401k and pay taxes. Well, that lets us do some math now. Let's see how much money there is, how many people have it, and what their age is. And now we can actually predict the sale of securities because it's the law to do it. And we can see it coming, right? We can predict the future fiscally. If we make promises of Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security to the people in my home country, the United States, and we promise them $200 trillion, and we know how much that medical care costs on average, and we know how many people there are, and we know how old they are, and we know what year they hit, 65 or whatever when they can qualify, we can predict that expense and that explosion of costs, okay? So policy and demographics does give you a future, all right? And this is there's several ways, history repeats itself, trends kind of can give you a hint on the future, but nothing in my experience as an investor, nothing can give you more insight into what is about to happen than when human beings make rules about money. So at the government level, there's two sets of rules. The first rules are called fiscal policy, and that's taxes and spending. How much are we going to take from who, and who are we going to give it to? That's basically it, right? Oh, we're going to take money from this guy and we're going to spend it and give it to this guy to do this thing, or not do this thing, right? Give and take. And those rules, how much are we going to charge in taxes? That tells you your future. I can tell how much it's going to cost me in taxes because I know what bracket I'm going to be in, right? I can predict that clearly. Monetary policy comes from the word money, monetary money. The first four letters are the same, right? It's money policy. And it's not only fascinating, it's not only interesting, it gives you insight on money creation and money destruction. And you are here to learn about how to earn more money, how to invest, how to acquire assets. And if you learn how the Fed fools about with different levers, that I call them, to try to manipulate how this money supply works, you can get an idea of what's going to happen to the value of a dollar. You get an idea of how easy it's going to be to get money or how hard it is with several levers. For example, if money is easy to get, it's not scarce. Ben Bernanke was a Fed chair for many years, and the speech that put him on the map when he was on the I think they call him board of governors or whatever it was, but Ben, before he became the guy, gave a speech in DC, and he said this. He said, just like gold, listen to this, everybody, just like gold, it's about scarcity. So if gold is really desirable, but there's not a lot of it around, its value goes really, really high. If it was raining gold, right, and it was coming out of the sky, if we had a big meteor shower come down, it was all gold nuggets, well, then gold would be laying around everywhere and it wouldn't be as valuable because you could pick it up off the ground. Well, the Federal Reserve has the ability to create as much money as they want to. So they can make it as abundant as they want. And if they make the money tremendously abundant, then it's not going to be worth as much. And what's interesting is I did this class, 2-3 years ago is when I developed it, the one I'm giving you. And I did this class, and you can see the prediction. When I don't get to say I'm right very often, but as you watch this class, you'll say, oh my gosh, no wonder. Andy said we were going to have huge inflation. No wonder a loaf of bread is what it is. No wonder when I go to the grocery store now, it's hard to get out of there with under $100, right? It's hard to. And it's because your money is losing its value. And the people who save, it's easy to predict that they're going to get killed. Because if your money's under the mattress and prices double, your money's, worth half as much. So understanding all of the different levers that the Fed can pull and understanding how they can pull them gives us insight as investors about where things are likely to go.
So the Fed then affects interest rates. It affects how much money is in the system. And by doing that, it affects the cost of products. Does that include the price of stocks?
It includes the price of everything. When you have dovish policy that weakens the dollar, stocks go up. Why? Because it takes more dollars to buy those shares of Apple, like it would take those dollars. Doesn't matter whether it's consumables or assets. Doesn't matter. If the value of a dollar is going down, it's going to take more of those dollars to buy a loaf of bread, and it's going to take more of those dollars to buy some shares of stock. It's not going to matter. And so when the Fed tweaks certain things, we expect asset prices to rise. Now you mentioned interest rates. Could I share a couple of things on that, or do we have to go to break?
Let's go to break. We'll talk interest rates, but also earlier you said how the policies can affect various, I'm going to call it markets. And I'd love to know, when you say that, and don't answer yet, if that gives you a clue on what stocks to buy. For example, you mentioned people getting older, healthcare, and they have to get rid of their money in their 401k. Does that affect you with exactly what stocks to buy, or more of a philosophical approach? So let's hit that right
when we come back. Yep.
All right. Thanks, Andy. Okay, welcome back to Rich Dad's Stockcast with Andy Tanner. Andy Tanner promised us a couple things. He promised us that he would discuss really why the Fed has so much power, and also if that's a philosophical approach to investing, or if there's a way to make it day-to-day practical tips, as Andy started the show with predicting the future. I don't want you to forget, Andy gave us a huge course on the Federal Reserve. It's in the descriptions. It's free. I think Andy would tell you that understanding the Federal Reserve might be the foundation, possibly the most important thing you can understand as an investor. I'll let those words come out of Andy's mouth. But so let's bring Andy back and let's discuss why the Federal Reserve is so powerful.
I would not only this class, there's a reason I give this class away for free. And the reason I spend, give people hours and hours. I imagine if we didn't teach math in school. Imagine if we didn't teach reading in school. You missed an essential. Everyone needs to have math. Everyone needs to be able to read and write. You have to make it in life. And yet, for some reason, the very rules of money are not taught in school. People can go into a freaking voting booth and have no idea what the government's doing, or what they're voting for, or what they're not. They have no idea. And so this is a labor of love. I would not only take that class, I would share that link with every member of my friends and family, everyone I knew, and say, take it and see, and say, okay, this is something that everyone should know and everyone should have been taught, because even if you're just a consumer and you never buy a piece of real estate and you never buy a share of stock, you still go to the grocery store, you still go to the gas pump, you still have an electric bill. This affects every human being. And there's the rant. They come out. I don't plan them. I just realize when I'm doing it.
And you're not even an angry man. Yep.
I'm not angry. I'm passionate, though, because it makes me crazy that ignorance shackles so many people, and they're not going to have their well-being financially, and they're not going to be elevated in their financial well-being in ignorance. It's not going to happen. So knowledge is the key. Let's talk rate for a minute. Why? Before we talk about your practical versus philosophical, let's understand what we're talking about.
Beautiful.
The United States has the strongest economy in the world. That gives them a very unique position because it allows us to tax. Corporations are making money, people are making money. The government can tax that, and that's really their power. If we had a weak economy, we were like a third world country, what would our bonds wouldn't be worth anything? There's no confidence. There's no faith in the credit, right? There's no confidence or full faith or credit in the United States. So the dollar is backed by the full faith and credit. It's the economy. It's the ability to tax, and therefore we can deliver on our promises, right? How are we going to pay back the money we borrow? We tax people and pay it back. So the size of the gross domestic product, the power and engine of the United States is the largest in the world. And that's why one of the reasons they have a lot of power. Now, if the Fed can create money out of nothing, the Fed can pay their bills in a different way. Alan Greenspan once said the U.S. government can pay any debt it has because it can always print money to do that. So theoretically speaking, this is guaranteed risk-free money. Now, notice I said theoretically, but if the government writes you a check, you can rest assured you can cash it. Now, how much that money will be worth is a different story, But if the government writes you a check, you will cash it, and it will go through. It will work. So when you are looking at the Fed, if the Fed says this, I will loan money to you at 5% with no risk. What that means is that's now a sound investment that is better than any other investment at 5% that carries risk. Greg, let me make it simple for you. If I say, here's investment A, you can get 5% on your money, and there's no risk to it. You're guaranteed reward without risk. But if on the other hand, I say, now here's 5% on your money, but you might not get any of it. What you going to choose, A or B?
Oh, I'm taking A all day.
Okay, so if the Federal Reserve comes out and says, we'll give you 5%, what that means is mortgages are now going to have to be higher than that. Because in order for you to find a justification to go for 6, 7, and 8, and the risk, in order to find the justification to say, no, Fed, I want to go for more, I'm going to take risk, well, they have to make it now higher than 5%, because if they don't, well, why would you go anywhere but the Fed?
Right.
So what the Fed does when it sets the rate, it's not like they have a law that says now everyone must have a rate above. It's competition they provide. So if a bank is out there doing mortgages at 3%, which is a lot of risk, right? I mean, you're a real estate investor. People don't always pay the rent, right? People get foreclosed on. People don't always pay the payment off. There are people who stop paying for the loan. There's risk in real estate or any other loan, credit cards, any other loan. So if the Fed says, well, we'll give you 5, this bank can no longer give a mortgage for 3, because who would do that, right? And so now they got to say, well, we got to take our rates to 6 or 7 to justify that risk. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. One question, is the bank getting their money from the Fed, and is that why it has to be above what the Fed charges?
Yeah. Why would the bank, let's say the bank has a choice of loaning money out to make, like the bank has savings, right? People come and the bank gets a lot of their money from savers, right? Where people walk in there and they say, here's, $1 million in a savings account. Now they have to pay interest on that money, don't they? Right. So that's an expense to a bank. All that saving money is an expense to the bank. So if they're given, 3 or 4%, well, then they've got to loan that out at 5 or 6%, right?
Right.
So when the bank looks at the savings they have and they say, where are we going to loan this out? Well, if they're going to loan it out in mortgages, they have to charge more than they would by just parking it at the Fed, because they can park money at the Fed. Member banks can deposit money at the Fed and get paid those rates. And they can borrow money from the Fed for certain rates and then relend it. There's all kinds of stuff they can do. And that's really what the course I'm going to give you shows you, every lever. There's words people don't know, things like discount window. What's that rate have to do with? Oh, the reverse repo rate. Well, what do we need that for? And how big is that market? And why has that grown into trillions a day, right? Why are these markets, why do they matter? Why do money markets matter? What's the difference between a money market and a savings account? And why does it matter? And why do I care? These are essential things to understand if you're going to be a stock investor. Now to your question of practicality, it is both philosophical and practical. If I'm going to buy a stock, think of it this way. Warren Buffett put it this way. He says, when the tide goes out, now you know who is swimming naked. So what specific stock is not affected by that? If the tide goes out, if the tide goes down, what ship rises? And if the tide goes up, what ship falls? You follow?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it doesn't really matter if you say, well, tell me about specific stuff. You're in the ocean, man. You are under that fiscal policy, and you're under that monetary policy. It's going to affect you. So think of it this way with a business. Let's say I'm ExxonMobil, and let's say I want to raise some money from investors, okay? and let's say we're going to issue some corporate bonds. I have to pay more now in interest to raise money than whatever the Fed rate is.
Gotcha.
So if the Fed rate's 5, I got to go 6 or 7. Why? Because I can't say it's risk-free. So every business is competing with the Fed in the ability to borrow money, because investors will say, well, why should I give money to Exxon at 6 or 7 or at 5 if I can give money to the Fed at 5, right? Or do reverse repo, all those different things affect it. And so banks, it all trickles down into, is an investor going to put money with a corporation, or is an investor going to put money in a CD, that's backed with FDIC stuff? It's all that type of stuff. So, or in a savings account rather, with FDIC stuff. So it's a big deal.
So when you mention Warren Buffett, all tides rise or get lower, is that what happened? I think on the 13th, the Fed had their meeting and they said, right now, we're not going to lower or raise interest rates. We're going to stay flat. But in 2024, expect 3 different, instances
Cuts.
of cutting the rates. And then
so that's
the first
bullish.
thing that happened is the stock market went up.
That's bullish. Why is that?
I'm guessing because if you lower interest rates, more money goes into the system. And so things get more expensive, including stocks.
Absolutely true. And that's for a couple of reasons. Okay. If I'm a real estate investor right now, and I have a variable rate, which you should probably never do, but let's say you did, and all of a sudden rates fall, my bottom line just got better, right? If I'm a business and capital is easy for me to get, that's easier to run my business, isn't it? It's less of an expense to me. It's easy. Why aren't as many people buying homes right now? It's not that we're having a lot of homes purchased. There's just not a lot of supply. Look, I look at my real estate property. Why would I ever sell? I'm getting 3% right now on my stuff. I'm not going to go out and pay 7 or 8. I'm not getting rid of that property or sell. I'm keeping that. Right. So there's no prices. So prices are high because there's simply no supply. No one wants to sell. But I'll tell you what, people that want to get a mortgage, if they're going to pay 6 or 7 or 8 right now, or whatever their credit lets them do, that's really hard. That's a big payment. And if they dropped it back down to 3 or 4, that's way easier. So you buy out, prices go up because there's more demand. So when you make money readily available, right, prices are going to fall because it's easier to get money. And if it's easier, less scarce, it's not as valuable. And so prices go through the roof. And so it is not like, is it a surprise to me that stocks would rise when the Fed, hints at rate cuts? Now, here's what's really interesting though. The Fed are not, they're not like, they're not flawless. They're not like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the Pope is infallible, right? The Pope is infallible, so they say. And so, the idea that there's infallibility at the Fed is just ludicrous, okay? Right. Not only is there infallibility at the Fed, but someone like Janet Yellen, I don't know, no disrespect to Secretary Yellen, but she's not infallible. No disrespect to Secretary Powell, Chairman Powell. They're not like omnipotent or omniscient. They don't know everything.
Right.
For example, Chairman Powell says, "Oh, we got inflation. It's just transitory. It's just COVID stuff." He came back later and says, "Oh, looks like I was wrong. It's here to stay." And this is the real tough part. Their goal is they're trying to ride this horse and manage it, and their goal is inflation at 2%. Well, we're over 3 right now. So how are they gonna raise rates and drop inflation? And this is scary stuff. It's scary stuff because they have printed so much that they've had to make the highest rate hikes in the shortest amount of time since they've been around to get control of this inflation, or it goes to hyperinflation. They got to get a handle on it. Well, if they're announcing, this is really interesting. That speech I mentioned where Ben Bernanke said, like gold, there's a limited amount of dollars. He said by increasing or decreasing the amount of dollars, or by credibly threatening to do so. That's a really important quote from that speech. The Fed hasn't done anything. They simply threatened to do it. They suggested, they hinted. And just if you are in a position where the very hinting of doing something affects the markets, that's a clue as an investor that I should probably learn about what those guys can do, how they do it. If the very fact they have that much power and that much control, the very hint at what rates might do, and it makes markets go up and down, is that something I should learn maybe, or is that something I should learn absolutely? I'll leave that for you to answer.
Well, how about we leave it for the audience to answer? But we do have to go, and I do want to just highlight that what you really showed how the Fed affects everything, not just investing, but the price of my milk or the price of anything I touch. And so I do want to get back to go to the descriptions, get Andy's class, because this clearly 30 minutes isn't going to cover it.
No, I mean, you can feel my frustration in that there's reverse repo, there's discount rate, there's what we call fractional reserve, like the lending, where you hear these things that, someone puts in this much and they get a loan out this much, right? All of that stuff is covered. And here's what I'm proud of. The talent we have is to make it simple. And so if you would like to have all this stuff just so clear and get such a handle on it to where it's like easy for you to understand, that's why I'm giving you that gift. It's awesome. You'll love it. Write in. Tell me about it. It's fun.
This might be the most passionate you've been on a show.
It's such an important topic that people don't know about. Yeah. Most people cannot go sit in the barber chair and converse about the Fed. They're going to talk about last Thursday's game because no one knows about it. No one understands it. And so think about that. There's this huge machine that affects everything globally, everything you buy, asset or no, everything, that people don't know how it works. That's crazy.
That is crazy. Shoot. Well, I guess I'm going to be taking your class too for 10, 15 hours. Awesome. That's incredible. That's a real gift. So
take an hour a day and you'll be done by the new year, and you'll see the new year in a whole new way, and you'll be able to make predictions much more effectively.
Wow, that's incredible. All right, Andy, thank you once again. Everybody write comments so that we know what you'd like Andy to teach you next, what should be explained. So Andy, thank you for your generosity.
Absolutely.
Time, but also the generosity of the course.
I'll put one more plug in. If someone were to say, I do have a crystal ball, would you want it? Well, that's one of the closest things you can get. So thanks much, Greg. I always enjoy this time with you, and I'm excited to see everyone's comments.
Yeah, I am too. That's great. All right, Andy, thank you so much.
All right.
We'll see you next
week. Awesome. Okay.
All right. Bye.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.